I have my metal belly off today, and it's one of the things that I like about Bushwacker. My first airplane was a Maul M5, and it didn't have a metal belly. Maul has never built an airplane with a metal belly as far as I know, and it was a real pain to get back into this tail section on a Maul if you needed to do anything. So that was one of the first things that was on my list of things to do when I built this experimental. And it makes it really nice because now you can just have access to everything in here. You can see I have my antenna for my ELT mounted there. My front attach point for the horizontal is actually adjustable on this airplane. It's set where I like it now, so I don't plan on changing that in the future. But it gives you two panels that you can pull off, and then where most of the time a Maul, the baggage ends at this back door here, my baggage actually comes back about another 2 feet, and so the metal belly comes to the point where the baggage actually ends. So I've got welded on tabs with nut plates, and it comes on and off pretty quickly with a screwdriver. But this just allows you to get in here, do any work. You know, if you did twist the tail, which would be highly unlikely on a Maul because they're built hell for stout, you could get in here and fix a cracked tube or a bent tube. And I've never bent anything back here on a Maul, so it's not likely, but it does allow you to get the crud out. You can take the metal belly off, get all the dirt and debris out, vacuum it if you want, wash it, however you want to do it. There's an inspection hole here to get to the adjustment on the elevator, and then 2 adjustments on each side. Those panels each come off. Here's something else I changed on Bushwacker. I always hated how you had to get in from up above to work on your oleos, and I had to come up with kind of a new system anyway so that I could charge these Acme shocks if I needed to. So I made a removable panel here, and it goes in place. It's all nut plated, so it doesn't take long with a screw gun to get the panel off. But now you have access. You can check out your bolts, make sure that they're not bent. I use NAS bolts, so they're pretty strong, pretty hard to bend anyway. But you can see, you know, you can check out your attach point and make sure that nothing's wonky on it if you've had a hard landing. And it only takes a few minutes to expose this whole thing. So if you want to take the oleos off, you're not bent over up inside the airplane either. It just makes everything so much more accessible. And I don't understand really why Maul does it the way they do it, but probably for manufacturing simplicity. But this is ideally much better. Anyway, you can kind of see how these rotate on the eyeball bearing up in here. And they're charged here at this Schrader valve. And I can't say enough about these Acme shocks. They're amazing. So this is how I did Bushwacker. All nut plated, and then there's a panel here that goes in place. And I made some little boots out of a neoprene fitting to seal up around the shock itself. So I'm going to go down to my shop and paint it. I put it on right before I went to Alaska and didn't take time to paint it. I just made it up real quick. So I'm going to go down and clean that up now and paint it. So one of the things I really love about this airplane is how much space and how easy it is to load. Of course, like all Mauls, it has the double doors, but I actually have a bigger area in the back here than a standard Maul. So I'm going to go ahead and take the seat out, and I'll show you how much area I actually have. So it's a sling seat. Basically, this section comes out, and then there's a removable crossbar here that goes in. And then there's 2 bolts to take it out here. Anyway, once you get it unscrewed, this rotates forward, comes out of that little socket over there, and then the whole seat comes out. And then once you have the whole seat out, you got this whole area. So I'm going to pull the rest of my gear out. I carry my tool bag in the back here, and I tie it in place so that it can't move around. That way the CG doesn't shift on me when I'm landing, if I'm braking hard or whatever. So pull my tool bag out. And then I have all this area. So if I want to camp out, if I want to throw a sleeping pad in here, I can literally put my whole body in here. There's nothing that sticks up in this floor. And I have, from where my head is, right here, at the back of the seat, I still have a foot beyond in the back there where my feet are. And I've camped in here many times and it works really well. You just have to raise the tail up a little bit. I usually look for a spot that I can roll the airplane back into or pick the tail up onto. So anyway, this is the baggage area. It is superior to any airplane I've ever had. And like I said, nothing sticks up other than I have these two tie down points so that when I put my ferry tank in, and my ferry tank sits in between these 2 points, and then I have a couple attach points that I ratchet strap to here, and then it goes right into this one-way check valve here. So all I have to do is unscrew this nut and screw the hose on, and away I go. And I can go for about 1,000 miles. It's 6 a.m. on Thursday, August 19th, I think. And this is my pile of gear that's going to sit next to me. I have a dry bag with all my get out of Dodge stuff if I should have to go down. I've got a alpaca raft that I partially inflated. This is the rest of the gear that's got to fit in the airplane. I've got a 24-gallon marine tank that I can pump right into my fuel system. And then that's my bag that I always have in my airplane: rope, tie downs, tools, etc. So I'm getting ready to load all this up. Weather's not looking that great, but we're gonna give it a go, see how far we can make it today. Goal is Sitka, Alaska, and I'm here in La Center, Washington. So okay, we're loaded. We still have to go get fuel. So we got gear, and we're gonna have some more fuel down here in the belly pod up front, and these 2 bottles of what looks like pee, but it's actually solution for treating antlers and velvet. So we're just about ready to head down and get the fuel. It's a clear day here in Palmer. We're going to try to go through the Alaska Range and up to Kotzebue today. It's probably blowing 10 right now. So good day to start. Another feature that I like on Bushwacker is my cowling. So, you know, originally on Malls, you got to undo a whole bunch of screws to open the cowling. On Bushwacker, you just pop it open, flip it up just like on a Cub, and everything is right there to work on. It's so much easier. Adding oil, checking to make sure all your connections are correct. You know, you can look over both sides in just a few minutes and be ready to fly. And you don't have that with a stock mall cowling. You really go usually between either annuals or oil changes or 100-hour inspections, you know, before you pull the cowling off, because there's so many screws. It kind of is a deterrent. So that's a pretty cool feature too. And I don't think I'd have another airplane without a flip-up cowling like that. I designed the interior to get me up as high as possible. It uses a stock Super Cub seat base, and it uses the extra thick seat cushion that Oregon Aero makes. And so this is Oregon Aero covered seat cushions. It basically gets you up high enough that there's probably the best visibility out of this airplane of any airplane I've ever flown, with maybe the exception of the Sherpa. And then my instrument panel is pretty basic. Garmin transponder, Garmin G5, Dynon, engine. It's basically the EMS D10, I think, which is all the engine instruments. An Era 696, I think it is, or 660. GPS. All the breakers and switches are on that side. Obviously, this is a constant speed prop, so you got governor. I do have emergency alternate air in the center there in case I iced up. What else? Trig radio. Anyway, it's pretty basic. I shaved the top of it. You know, normally a Maul kind of radiuses out up over the top, and I cut it down so it's basically as low as you can get it, which really doesn't matter because you sit so high, but it's nice, clean. These are like grab handles for getting up in to the airplane. You know, it's single controls, heel brakes and rudder pedals just like a Super Cub, you know, stick like a Super Cub, and flap handles on the left hand side like the Super Cub. I moved the fuel valve to the right side. Normally Maul built their airplanes with the fuel valve on this side, but it didn't work out the way I was setting it up, so I moved it over to the right side. I have an EarthX battery mounted to the firewall. Anyway, it's a unique airplane, but there's really not too many airplanes out there that will do what this airplane can do. Land in the places it'll land, haul the load it'll haul. And you know, if you want to haul 3 people in here, you could easily do it. You know, 2 people in the back seat, me in the front. You could even put a seat in the back there if you really wanted to. You could have a 4th seat, put seatbelt points in the back. I've never flown with more than 3 people in the airplane, except maybe when I've gone rafting and then we just pile in. So this is the ultimate off-airport airplane for backcountry adventures. Pretty much no frills, you know. I have interior panels to protect it where it needs protected, but it's pretty much a no-frill airplane. Weighs 1359 as you see it. I have the new Acme Aero suspension on this, which I'm the first person to ever run this suspension. It is truly amazing. It's a game changer for this airplane. I'm running 5-inch extended gear, 35-inch bush wheels, super lightweight billet aluminum wheels that I machined myself. I'm running the Acme Aero Stinger on the back. That is also a game changer. Super amazing what you can land in for roughness and actually drag your tail through. Grab handle for moving the airplane around. Double slotted flaps. Only Maul wing to ever sport the double slotted flaps that I know of. They're on custom hinges that I made myself. Patroller doors. Full glass all the way, no bar in the center. The wings are extended 1 foot over what the biggest wing that Maul ever produced was. So the wing, I need to put a tape measure on it, but it's probably somewhere around a 36-foot wingspan. I added all the extra to the ailerons. So the ailerons are 79 inches and the flaps are, I think, 114 now. I took area off the flaps so that I could add area to the aileron to make it a little bit more sporty because it's such a big wing. I've never tried it, but I'm sure you could put a 55-gallon drum in here if you wanted to. I've flown this airplane with 3 30-gallon drums strapped behind the back seat, or the pilot seat. So 1, 2, 3 30-gallon drums plus the fuel in the wings. And so I forget how much fuel that is. At the time I had the main tank, so 44 gallons plus another 90. And I think I also had a 15-gallon also. So I had like 105 plus the 44, and I was flying all the way up to the Arctic Ocean and with all my gear. So I had all the fuel and all my gear in here. If you've stuck with me this far, I'm going to go do some flying now. I always hate it when people put something up for sale and then they don't include a price tag on it. This airplane is $160,000. If you want this airplane, that's what you're going to pay. Or something very close. Obviously, you're always open to make me a reasonable offer. If you come here and think you're going to fly it, to test drive it, that's not going to happen. The problem with that is there's no way I could put you on my insurance. You got to have, I believe, a minimum of 10 hours in type. Well, how would you get 10 hours in this type other than fly around with me in the back seat for 10 hours as the instructor? I'm not going to do that. So what I am going to do is I'm going to take it out. I'm going to demonstrate what it's capable of with you in the back seat. Or if you want to get out and watch, you're welcome to get out and watch. But I'll show you what you can do with you in the back seat. We can load it up with gear if you want even, and then see what it'll do. And I'll fly it around. I'll demonstrate it in any way you'd like to see it demonstrated. And when it's all said and done, if you like it, you give me a check for $160,000 and you take the airplane and fly it. If you don't like it, once you've flown it within a reasonable amount of time, let's say you go out and fly it for a few hours and you don't like it, you bring it back, I hand you your check back, and you go on your way, no hard feelings. Obviously, if you damaged it in the first 2 hours of flying it and you decided to return it, you'd be responsible for any damage done. It would be pretty hard to duplicate this airplane in this day and age. I'm not saying it would be impossible, but working with the FAA to build an experimental airplane from a bunch of mall parts would be almost impossible. Maybe not impossible, but almost. This airplane's built in the experimental category. It has no restrictions, and I built it back in 2004 with the FAA's knowledge. I dealt with a person at the Hillsborough FSDO. His name was Mike Robertson. I approached him with an initial phone conversation, and then he actually came out to my shop. We went over the parts that I was going to be using and modifying, and he basically gave his blessing to move forward with the project. I'm guessing that most people originally saw this airplane when it was tan with camo wings in the series Big Rock's long props. So it is a little bit of a piece of history. It's changed quite a bit over the years. I wrecked it in 2014 and completely rebuilt it from the ground up and made the changes that I made during that time period. The changes that have been made over the years to Bushwacker have been many. The airplane originally started out after I had built it in 2004, and it weighed 1239, and it sported 31-inch bush wheels with an 84-inch prop. And then the wing was pretty much all stock. It had 126 inches of flap and 56 inches of aileron, which made it a handful in gusty conditions. It had a 1/2 degree of angle change in the angle of incidence. In 2004, it was configured like a mall, except it only had single controls. I had pulled out the rudder and brake pedals on the right-hand side and the control yoke. Back then, it was carbureted, just like a regular mall would have been, with the HA6 carburetor. And I always had problems with it stumbling, so I converted it to an updraft MA4-5 carburetor and went to 10-to-1 pistons and a 90-inch prop. And then I changed the inners of the oleos to a urethane versus the springs that Maul had put in them. I always hated Maul's exhaust, so I changed the exhaust to a CNC mandrel bent custom exhaust system for it. And so it had less problems with cracking and breathed a little better. Back then I was using stock Maul flaps and the stock maul ratchet, and I changed the ratchet to give me, I don't know, I think it was about 60 degrees of down on the flap versus what it originally had stock, which was much less. Before I installed the double slotted flaps, it landed around 41, 42 miles an hour, very similar to a Super Cub. Fast forward to 2014 when I was rebuilding it, I actually was flying a Super Cub, and I thought, I really like being up front by myself. I don't like having someone sitting next to me, and I like the center line of the airplane when I fly it. So I'm going to basically configure Bushwacker the way I want, and I configured it like a Super Cub. So now it's got heel brakes with basically they're Super Cub heel brakes and rudder pedals. It's got a single control stick, and the flaps are on the same side as what a Super Cub would be. So anybody that's ever flown a Super Cub, it feels almost identical when you sit in the front seat, other than the visibility is way better. I originally bought my first small because I wanted a 4-place airplane so that I could include my family in my flying. The M5, which I owned for approximately 7 years, really fit that bill nicely. My daughter was only about 4 at the time, and as a family, we could load up that M5 Maul and fly to Idaho and be fairly comfortable. As she got older, that was, it still worked, but it started taking more space, the comforts of home and teenage daughter. And so over the years, I basically probably transitioned from it being a family machine, especially after she left home, to where it was just me and my wife. And so the configuration that I have now works really well for 2 people. It would work fine for 3 people, but obviously 4 is going to be a problem. And really, to be honest, a Maul is not a great 4-place airplane as far as I'm concerned. If you need a true 4-place airplane, you're probably looking more for a Cessna 180 or a Cessna 185 or a Cessna 182. Anyway, there's just not a lot of room in a Maul to stick 4 adults. 4 small adults, no problem. 4 large adults, not so great. I did make some other changes when I rebuilt it in 2014. I went from the Lycoming 0360 which was a parallel valve engine, to a Lycoming IO360, which is an angle valve engine. The rating of those 2 engines differs by about 20 horsepower. In both cases, the engines were putting out more horsepower than what Lycoming rated them at. I'm guessing that the IO360 angle valve that I'm running now, it's also a dynafocal mount versus the conical mount, so it's a little smoother. But both engines probably are pushing 20 horsepower more than what they were stock with the 10-to-1 pistons and custom exhaust. Original Bushwacker, when I first built it, only had the main tanks, which would be about 44 gallons of fuel if you ran them dry. New Bushwacker 2.0 is what I call the black one, is actually 64 gallons. So I have tip tanks now and transfer pumps. With the marine tank in the airplane and leaned out, I can usually make it about 1,000 miles of flying on what fuel I have in the airplane, which would amount to about 88 gallons of fuel. At my cruise power setting, I will usually see about 105 miles an hour over the ground in no wind conditions. And so you got a lot of flying that you can do on 88 gallons of fuel. The 35-inch bush wheels is kind of the determining factor about how fast you can push this airplane through the air. I'm guessing that if you ran 850 tires on it, it would probably do 140 miles an hour. If you ran 31s, it would probably do 115, 120 miles an hour. But the 35-inch bush wheels, it's a lot of parasitic drag. Since rebuild, I've put 430 plus hours on the airplane. The engine I overhauled just a little over a year ago, and it has 130 hours total time. So it's pretty fresh. It's just broke in. In a lot of ways, this airplane's very custom, but in some respects, just about any mall part would bolt onto it in an emergency. So let's say you flipped it up on its back. You needed a set of wings. Stick a stock set of mall wings on it, fly it away. Let's say you damaged the wing struts. Stock mall wing struts go on it, no problem. Let's say you damaged the flaps. Stock mall flaps will fit it. Stock mall landing gear, stock mall oleos. You name it, it'll fit on here pretty much, with the exception of ailerons, which are totally custom. Pretty much most small parts would fit on this airplane. The engine mount is a custom mount built by me. It's dynafocal mount, designed just for this airplane to put the CG where I want it. And so that would be a custom part. But for the most part, a lot of mall parts are interchangeable in a pinch. I would hate to actually know how many hours I spent building this airplane, but I guarantee you can't duplicate it for the price I'm asking. You may be wondering why I'm selling it. Well, I built a Super Cub, so when I built that Super Cub, I never intended to own two airplanes for actually as long as I've had two airplanes. Both airplanes do similar missions, with the exception that Bushwacker is a much better adventure airplane. But as a lot of you know, I like to build and create, and my new project is coming, and it's coming in the next 2 weeks. So I need to sell one of the airplanes, and the Super Cub is the newest airplane for me, and I decided I was going to keep it for at least another year while I build my new project. So that is the reason. Right now I'm fighting a cold, so if you notice a frog in my throat, that's the reason. Anyway, I'm trying to answer as many questions as I can think of in this video about the airplane, and I want to avoid as many unnecessary phone conversations as possible or emails back and forth. So I'm going to direct anybody that actually is interested in this airplane to watch this video first, and then make a list of questions you have. If this video doesn't answer those questions, then feel free to email me. I have a limited amount of time for answering phone calls and questions through email each day. If you are serious about this airplane, then by all means call me. Here's a good use of your spot landing skills when landing off airport. If you see any type of dimensional lumber, you always want to try to avoid it. They usually can have nails or other sharp things. And I have learned the hard way on a 31-inch bush wheel, getting 2 punctures from a piece of dimensional wood years back that ruined the tire. It was a brand new tire and it ruined it. So back to Bushwacker 2.0. I used a Boeing surplus fiberglass with a Nomax core for the floorboards. The glass in the airplane, with the exception of the windscreen, is all polycarbonate with a hard coating. And yeah, so I tried to use pretty thin polycarbonate glass to save weight. I think the side doors are only 1/16 of an inch thick, and the windscreen is, I believe, an 1/8 inch thick clear windscreen. I don't like the tinted windscreens because of if you're flying in low visibility, having tint is not good to me. When I overhauled the engine last year, I put brand new steel barrel angle valve cylinders on it with 10-to-1 forged pistons. I sent all the internal parts to Premier Aircraft for inspection, and they went through everything there, resized the rods, etc. I put new roller tappets in it. This is a roller engine, so it's got the roller cam and roller tappets. The case went to Divco, and they did their work on the case. Here's another spot where using the judgment of how high your tires are over an obstacle is super important, because you wouldn't want to hit this log down too low. It's not a small log, and it would take the gear off the airplane. When I pulled this engine for overhaul, it had, I believe, around 3,500 hours total time. And so now, since this overhaul, it's got 130 hours total time. Western Propeller in Troutdale, Oregon did the overhaul on the Propeller. I've done work for Western Propeller for almost 30 years now, and so have built up a relationship with Tom out there, and him and I discussed what I wanted to do. And so he suggested that I go with an 84. I thought that it might be a little bit too big to begin with. I flew those 84-inch blades for, I don't know, maybe 25 or 30 hours and just decided that it was too big of a blade. And so I dropped the Propeller back off at Western Propeller and had them put 80-inch blades in it, which work really well. I use a stock M7 rudder on this airplane. Well, I should say it's kind of stock. I took out the servo tab because I don't use the interconnect servo that Maul uses. This airplane uses a stock horizontal and a stock elevator and a stock trim tab that you could basically buy off the shelf from Maul. The 35-inch bush wheel tires were brand new 130 hours ago, right before I left to go on my trip to Alaska last summer. I have a baby bush wheel in the wide fork with the Acme Stinger for my tail wheel. Any of the aluminum interior panels are powder coated in a gunmetal gray and are made out of a .020 2024-T6 aluminum material. I used this airplane 2 years in a row for my adventures to Alaska. It would be hard to duplicate those adventures with any other airplane. The load that I could haul, the amount of distance that I could cover with two guys, full fuel. We went all the way to the Arctic Ocean both times, and were able to complete a caribou hunt and moose hunt both years. The successfulness of those hunts entirely depended on this airplane. It will be bittersweet to see an airplane go that I've owned for almost nearly 20 years now, but it is time for it to find a new home. The brake system uses a Grove high pressure piston for each brake on each wheel, and they work really well. The brake calipers are the ABI brake calipers, and the wheels are custom billet machined by me. They're a double puck caliper, and I also drilled the brake disc to lighten them up. The 5-inch extended gear was built by me. It was actually the original set of gear that I built in 2005 or 6, and then Airframes Alaska actually then copied my gear and sells it today. So you can actually buy the gear through Airframes Alaska now. Bill Duncan asked for my permission, and I gave him permission to put it into production. The first time I ever landed this spot, was in my M5 Mall back in probably 2000 with Lonnie Habersetzer watching. And I'll tell you what, it was not a pretty landing. This is much rougher than it looks, and on stock mall gear with stock oleos, it was all I could do to get stopped before the end. Obviously, you don't want to come up short on that high bank there. You'll take the gear right off the airplane. And so that's a little intimidating. The other thing is it's just so undulating that if you're on the brakes and you're hitting those bumps, it feels like half the time you're going to go up on your nose, and the other half the time you're getting bucked so hard that you're going to go over on your back. Not a fun place to land. But with the Acme, it just smooths it out to where it's nothing. This spot that I'm landing here has this really big bump right at the beginning, and there's no way to avoid hitting it. So you always hit it. Anyway, I kind of show it in slow motion. You gotta love bush wheels and Acme shocks after riding through stuff like that. This airplane would be considered fairly heavy by Super Cub standards at 1359, but if you compared it to the average mall out there, it's probably 200 pounds lighter, maybe even 300 pounds lighter. So when I use this airplane for adventuring, me and my buddy, we weigh about 320 pounds, and full fuel's about another 400 pounds. And then, so that puts the airplane at about 20, maybe 2,100 pounds with my bag that's always in the airplane. So that gives us another 300 to 400 pounds of gear to carry. That's a full load, but the airplane will do it. There's a lot of times when I am at that gross weight of 2,400 pounds traveling. That doesn't mean that you can do a lot of off-airport adventures traveling at that weight. There may be times where you've got to make multiple trips into a spot, such as our moose camp, which is a pretty short, rough spot. Buying and owning this airplane is just the beginning. It's learning how to use the tool that is the important part. You can own the best airplane in the world, which may or may not be this airplane, and if you don't have the skills or time in the seat to make it do what you want it to do, it becomes less of a tool. So time in the seat in any airplane and practicing your craft is what's going to get you into the places that you want to fly into. I used to practice 3 or 4 times a week. Now, this was 15, 20 years ago, but you don't get to a level of competency by flying once a week, airport to airport. This last place I'm landing before I head for home is probably one of the rougher places I land. With the Acme suspension and the bush wheels, it makes it doable. But I would say it was probably a gear failure waiting to happen if you went in there on stock mall gear with, say, 31-inch bush wheels and stock mall oleos. So hopefully I've answered most of the questions that you'd have if you were interested in buying this airplane. If I haven't, feel free to send me an email at mallguy@aol.com.